So, we are going to start talking about the water cycle. And I like to call this not your average water cycle because we are going to be getting a little more into detail. What's the water cycle? I want you to share. What do you think it is, or what do you know it to be? I'm serious. Start sharing. Alright, well, assuming that we actually had some sharing going on, let's take a look at what I think you probably said. Body of water, evaporation, condensation, precipitation. We've all heard of this before. But now, let's look at the grown-up water cycle. Let's get out of kindergarten. Body of water is there, evaporation's there, condensation, precipitation. Oh, we have runoff. We have infiltration, groundwater, plant uptake, and transpiration. So these guys here might be some new terms to you, and we're going to discuss those. Now, evaporation, liquid to gas. Does anyone know whether or not it's endothermic or exothermic? Endothermic. Energy is absorbed. Think of endo as in. You need to add energy to liquid to have it become gas. Condensation. Water vapor turns into liquid. In this, we have energy that is given off. So do you think it's endothermic or exothermic? Exothermic. Think of exo as outside, just like extrusive meant that it was lava. So exo, out, given off. Precipitation is water released from clouds. So we can have rain, we can have sleet, snow, hail, freezing rain, what have you. Runoff and infiltration. So surface runoff is precipitation runoff over the landscape, meaning it's just water that's going over the land at the surface. Anywhere in the world, a portion of water that falls as some form of precipitation infiltrates or goes into the subsurface soil and rock. Plant uptake and transpiration. Plants take up water to live. You can also hear transpiration or evapotranspiration. This is when water leaves the plant. So think of it this way. We have a tree. Okay. Alright. So water rains down on the ground. It goes in the ground and oh look, the tree's roots, they uptake the water and it goes all the way up into the leaves, and eventually through a special part of the plant some of that water escapes. It's called the stoma. So some of that water escapes through the plant. So that's how water gets back into the atmosphere from the plants. Now, let's look at the distribution of Earth's water. We have total global water over here in the first one. Take a look at this. This is pretty amazing. 96.5% is tied up in the oceans. Out of all the water. We have saline lakes, 0.07%, and saline groundwater. Then over here, this little section at the top is freshwater. So this blue section right here, that's the freshwater. So there's only 2.5% of the world's entire water resources considered to be fresh water. So if we expand, that's what this bracket is. If we expand that fresh water, to break that down further, 68.6% of fresh water is tied up in glaciers and ice caps. Now, obviously this graph was produced in 1993, so not extremely recent. So depending upon how much melt has taken place, this 68.6% might be rounded up to 70%. But remember, we're looking at a very small portion of all of the total global water. So we have to look into that a little bit further just to see if this should change. Groundwater, 30.1%. So all that stuff, remember talking about infiltration? If it's going into the ground, infiltrating, becoming part of the groundwater, that is 30.1%. So let's go to the tippy top again. So surface water, this little blue area up here, that's 1.3%. Surface water and other fresh water. So let's look at that 1.3% and expand that even more, excuse me. So surface water and other fresh water. Ice and snow, 73.1%. Lakes, 20.1%. Then let's go into these tiny itty bitty little things here. So soil moisture, 3.52%. This guy right here. Swamps, marshes, and then rivers, biological water, atmospheric vapor. I want to just take one moment to make sure you understand how this graph is breaking everything down. So this is total global water. This block right here. The blue, the gray, the green. All water. So this very top section is the fresh water. When we look at just the fresh water, we come over here to this block, and this breaks down where that fresh water is located, where is it distributed. And then once again, we look at glaciers, ice caps, groundwater, and then surface water and other fresh water is that very small percent, that 1.3%. We are going to look in this column over here at just that 1.3% and then break it down even further. And that's how we get another 73.1 and 20.1% plus all of these guys over here. So it's not that you're going to add 96.5 plus 68.6 plus 73.1 and all the other percentages that you see on here. It's a breakdown further and further. So just like in your energy projects, how some of you looked at, okay, out of all of the world's renewable resources or renewable energy, how much is used by wind? How much is used by solar? This is looking at, okay, out of all of the fresh water, let's break it down further and break it down further. This is something like what you might see on the PSSAs, where you have to really look at and figure out what is this graph telling you. So that's something to keep in the back of your head. Now, here we have the water cycle picture I wanted to share. This looks a lot more complicated than what you would have drawn in kindergarten whenever you said the water cycle had, what, 4 steps in it? So let's take a look at everything we've talked about. This, we have our body of water. I'm going to put a little B-O-W. That's a little hard to see. Let me change that. Okay, so let me just change that. B-O-W. Alright, so body of water. And what do you think these arrows represent? Evaporation. Fabuloso. So evaporation, water vapor is going into the atmosphere. Eventually it's going to condense. And what type of reaction is that? Endothermic, exothermic? What is it? Exothermic. Great. Okay, so We have this thing called transportation up here. I didn't talk too much about that earlier. However, know that that type of that step is really just the movement of water vapor moving along. Now, precipitation, yes, it's rain and snow and all of that jazz, but what happens is that the air can't hold any more water vapor. It's condensed so much and becomes so heavy that it has to come back to our surface. So that's precipitation. Now let's take a look over here, up here, where you see kind of the same thing happening: condensation, transportation, precipitation. But here it takes a different route. We have snowmelt runoff with these arrows coming down. So imagine this glacier, excuse me, not glacier, but ice cap mountain. Some of that starts to melt. Well, that is going to turn into water and it's going to flow on the surface. So surface runoff. It's running off to the surface or on the surface. That is part of the surface flow, what you see right here. So we have all of this surface runoff, we have precipitation, and if you take a look, we have a little stream in the background that's running back into our body of water. So that's one more way it completes a cycle. However, it can also go back into our groundwater. So if you look over here, infiltration, remember, think of like the army. You just had Civil War days, so it infiltrates or goes into the ground. So infiltration, some of that runoff or precipitation is going to make it through the surface and into the ground and into the groundwater. So water table, if you've ever heard of that, the water table shifts depending upon how much water we have. So we have this groundwater, and eventually some of that groundwater does flow back into our body of water. However, some of it is, some of it is with, goes back into the atmosphere with plant uptake. Remember that word transpiration? Well, the roots need water for the plants, so water is going to go up the tree, just like I drew, only this is a lot prettier. Going to go up the tree, through the stoma, and back into the atmosphere. Okay, so we're going back into the atmosphere, and then we would condense. We might have some transportation going on, and then eventually back into the cycle. So this is a lot more complex than what you're used to seeing, and that's okay. We're big bad 8th graders now, right? Here is another picture of the water cycle, very, very similar to what we just looked at. A little bit simplified in comparison, but nothing on here is something new. Stream flow, that's really another word for surface runoff, just looking at more specifically the streams starting up at somewhere in the mountain, and we know that streams start at high elevations and then they'll eventually flow to higher ground. Now this freshwater storage, that's a fancy word for a lake, so a body of water. And that's all we have for you as far as the water cycle notes go. I know this was a little bit faster than normal, but that's fine. You are going to be given notes on your own, so you won't have to worry about not being able to write anything or not have been able to write anything down. So you should have your books with you. And now you'll be able to complete that worksheet that the sub is going to pass out, and that will be turned in at the end of class. I hope all of you guys have an awesome possum day, and I can't wait to see you again. Bye.